Well, hey, Star Wars fans, welcome back to another edition of the Clone Wars Chronicles, sponsored, and I'll say sponsored by the Rule the Galaxy family of podcasts. So great to be with you today. My name is Nick. If we've not had a chance to meet yet, I'm one of our regular co-hosts on Rule the Galaxy. But per the instruction, per the advice, per the mentoring of our very own Joseph Molinaro, he said, "Hey, Nick, you love the Clone Wars. What if you took a show and kind of spun off and we started expanding the empire of Rule the Galaxy and to do the Clone Wars?" So this is our second episode of the Clone Wars Chronicles. If you missed our last one, feel free to go back and go watch that. It was a ton of fun. We kind of set the stage for why Clone Wars podcast, why did this thing get created, and why is it just so freaking awesome? So we set the stage for that last time. And today we're going to jump back in with another arc that's a fan favorite, one of my favorite, one of my co-host favorite, who I'm going to introduce here in just a second. But real quick, if you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at rulethegalaxysw. We're also on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, hello. We're so glad that you guys are here with us. You just search Rule the Galaxy SW. Or if you have any burning questions, or you say, "Hey, I disagree with what they're saying," or "I think that these guys are tools," email us at Rule the Galaxy. Not at Rule the Galaxy. Email us at, not the at sign, rulethegalaxysw at gmail.com. Okay, that's enough of that. We'll go ahead. We'll jump in. But real quick, sitting with me in the co-pilot seat today is my fearless friend, companion, the one and only Mr. Sam Caldwell. Sam, how the heck are you doing today?
I'm good, Nick. I'm good. We're in our new house, so you have upgraded your Star Wars game in the background. We were talking about that earlier. You got these sweet new posters, and I have a lot of junk in the background. So for the whoever watches on YouTube, big time apologies. You can see my I don't even know what's behind me right now.
Hey, rather have junk in the background than junk in the trunk. How about that, right?
Well, if you've got both like me, that's a double loss on mine. But I'm doing well. Glad to be back. Glad to be talking some Star Wars and just back to doing what we love.
It's good, man. And hey, busy week for you. I know. Moved into a new house. Sam coaches football for a charter school down in the city. You guys got your first game today, correct?
We do. I got my football polo on. It's projected to be upper 50s and rain. About to go sled through the mud and see what happens. But yeah, first game today. Exciting times.
Now, I know you're not superstitious, but I know also the idea of not wanting to jinx it ahead of time. Can you give our listeners a projected score from your standpoint of how you think tonight's going to go? I'm putting you on the spot.
You put me on the spot. If all goes according to plan and the preparations went well and everybody actually shows up, never a guarantee, I would project that we would win somewhere in the realm of, I'll go 35-21, even though nobody kicks extra points. So add whatever the 2-point conversions are to that.
Okay, excellent. You heard it here first on the Clone Wars Chronicles, 35-21 Bulls prep. Looking forward to it, Sam. Hope you have a great game today, man. And we're cheering you on from across different states, different multiple lines, but pumped for you, man. And hey, speaking of being pumped about some stuff, we are going to go ahead and dive straight into our next arc that we're going to cover. My son is sleeping right now. I'm on dad duty watching him. And so for the love of God, we're going to jump in and get this thing started. But real quick, before we jump in, I know that something we said on the previous episode was, hey, we are not going to do an episode by episode rehashing. If you really want to go episode by episode, you can jump in and get a Disney Plus subscription. This is my shameless plug for Disney. Please don't sue us for talking about Star Wars. But you can jump in, get a Disney Plus subscription, and watch every single episode of those. It might be more fun than actually listening to me and Sam talk episode by episode. Now, that being said, it just so happens that the next arc that we're going to look at actually follows directly after the arc that we just covered. Some of you may be saying, "Nick, you're a hypocrite. You said that we weren't going to go episode by episode." Well, don't kill me. We're going episode by episode for the first couple. We'll dance around a little bit. And I'd love to put this out there. If you say, "Nick, we want to hear some specific arcs hit us up on Twitter. I know we may put some polls out there at some point. Let us know which arcs you want to hear us cover, and we'll go ahead and jump into that. For all of you, this is my sidetracked ADD brain that's going for a second. For all of you who are not watching on YouTube right now, let me paint you a little visual description of my friend Sam Caldwell, who has the Qui-Gon Jinn look going, if I've ever seen it before. I had to make a mention of the mane, Sam. How long you been growing your hair out?
I've gotten just 2 small trims since summer of 2017. So about 3.5 years.
Very nice. Very nice. I was going to say, if you're not watching on YouTube, this is our YouTube plug. Get in, watch YouTube. All you got to do is put on a Jedi robe and you could be Liam Neeson. How about that? There you go. Okay, enough of me. We'll go ahead and we'll jump right into our arc for today. The arc that we're covering covers 3 episodes from episode 102 to 104. And this has been dubbed the Malevolence arc. Last arc that we covered was not even an arc. It was just 1 episode. It was the kickoff. We got some secondary characters. This one we jump right in with is our main characters that we saw from the Clone Wars movie. If you've watched all the movies, the prequels up to this point, you're familiar with a good majority of these characters. But let me just do this, Sam, because I think it'll be helpful as we go. I love reading the little synopsis of these. Like if you go online and you look, hey, what's the synopsis per episode? Mm-hmm. Episode 102, titled Rising Malevolence, is described as this. Jedi Master Plo Koon locates a new separatist warship in the, ready for this, Abregado system, and his command and commands his Republic fleet to attack it. After contacting Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano, unaware of the power this ship possesses, Plo Koon's fleet quickly is taken down, with most of his crew dead or helpless inside of a escape pod, waiting for rescue. Real quick, Sam, before we jump into this, I wonder if we take this second. Why did we choose this arc? You know, we could have gone anywhere in this. What for you made you go, hey, I think we need to talk about this one?
That's a good question. I'll be honest, the first time I watched through the show, this arc was only memorable to me for the fact that, again, I hadn't watched the movie beforehand. I jumped right into the show, and it was the first introduction of, and I would assume this was, you know, if you didn't go see the movie in theaters, but you started watching this on Cartoon Network, this is the first time you start to kind of get the expanded characters. So this is the first time in the show, like Ahsoka comes in,
right,
and is just like right in the action. Like, hey, I'm here and I'm Anakin's Padawan, and we're doing this stuff. But when I went back, and I've watched it multiple times since then, I really do think this sets a good stage for a couple of things. We know that in the last episode, the clones were such a focus with Yoda, but this also then starts to show the expanded Jedi and how they relate to the clones, like Plo Koon coming in, how he cares about the clones, and then but also seeing that the wartime tensions of the Jedi Council, and then our main characters, and Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. So
right. And I think you make a great point, Sam. It's almost unapologetic that they throw you into the action. If you didn't watch the Clone Wars movie, all of a sudden you see Anakin Skywalker has an apprentice, and you got to think that part of your mind goes, whoa, time out. He is an apprentice. He didn't have an apprentice. We talked about that on the last episode of this. But just, I think what a cool, very George Lucas, here are the facts. Here's what we're going into. I'm not going to explain how we got to this point. You can go back and you can figure that out. And I just love that, which brings to a great point. This episode, and real quick, our hope in this episode is not to necessarily rehash every detail, but it's to kind of point out some of the beautiful parts of these episodes that we love, and then really have some discussion around those. But this episode, one of my favorite parts of this is the way that it opens. And it opens with Plo Koon and his fleet, essentially his ship, searching for a brand new rumored separatist ship that's supposed to be this super weapon out there. And I love that it starts, they pull up in the Abregado system, and there's this beautiful red, it's either sun, planet, something like that. And I don't know about you, Sam, but visually for me, this actually felt like a hearkening back to the, if you ever watched Samurai Jack, if you ever watched the Gendry Tartakovsky Clone Wars, this really bright color red. I don't know if maybe I'm the only one that picked that up, but there was this contrast between the dark space and this bright red planet, and then the ships in front of it almost silhouetted. That to me is just like eye candy, just beautiful, beautiful stuff. I don't know. This was the last episode was good. It felt a little chintzy as far as animation goes. For me, I felt like we took a leap and a bound even between episode 101 and 102.
Yeah, well, and you don't see like, and this is stupid space stuff, but you don't see a lot of gas giants in Star Wars, right? I mean,
Very true.
George Lucas is very open about like, I have a forest planet and I have a ice planet, and like, they just go to these places and they still look beautiful from space. But yeah, this series in the Abregado system kind of stands out of like, you don't really see those sort of contrasts, but it is great looking, right? And it looks very good.
Well, and we see our first silhouette when Plo Koon pulls into the system and he says, we believe that we found the warship, and silhouetted against the planet is this massive separatist cruiser, which very cool that they took the design from episode 3 and just expounded it out. If you haven't watched this arc, you got to go watch it, even just for that. And on the side of this cruiser is a brand new prototype weapon they've never used before, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, is basically just a giant ion cannon.
Yep. It's meant to shut down the ships that it comes across, so they can shoot them right out of the sky. I
will say this, for a kids' television show, is pretty dark stuff. It doesn't seem that dark at first glance. The more you watch this, it's pretty dark. To think that we have a weapon on our ship that we are going to blast out on unsuspecting ships that are coming to attack us, basically, make them dead in the water, and then we're going to pull right up alongside them and just blast them into smithereens. For me, I watched it and I just went like, man, that is pretty dark stuff for a kids' television show.
Yeah, we'll probably get to it because it happens a lot in the show, and it'll tie into kind of Grievous's character. But the last episode was all droids, right? Is the 3 clones, but they're just running through droids, classic Star Wars stuff. But yeah, in this episode, starts off right off the bat, knocking out a ship, and then just innocent passengers and just picking them off. And it doesn't. There's not a lot of like on-screen death happening, but just a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I finished Avatar: The Last Airbender, as we will shout out millions of times on the show, I'm sure. But a lot of times she could like call out what happens because like, well, they're not going to die. Like, it's a kid show, right? Like, it's not going to die. It's a kid show, and it holds true in that show and in a lot of shows. But they don't wait in the show.
Nope.
They
pull no punches. They say
they hold nothing battle back.
Here we go. We're going for it. And so we see this. We see Plo Koon's ship get destroyed. And very similar to what we saw in the first episode, I thought this was a cool contrast. You see Yoda in the first episode with a band of clones, about 3 together, him and the clones, and they're isolated together. In the same way, Plo Koon jumps into an escape pod with 3 or 4 clones, and they eject out into space. But because of the ion cannon, they are now dead in the water as well too, in this massive debris field, hoping that somebody comes to find them. And so what you see from this original, it's going to be a space battle, very quickly starts to transfer into this is going to be a rescue mission. And right before their ship had been blown up, they'd been communicating with Anakin and Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, who were all a part of a fleet, and all of a sudden they go dead. And so now we see Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, who, as Sam pointed out, is now a brand new character that we're adding into it. And this was one of my parts of this episode, Sam, that stuck out to me. And they find out, hey, we haven't had any radio contact, any transmission. And so they call back to Coruscant, and they're talking with Mace Windu, Yoda, and Chancellor Palpatine, all 3 of them on this one HoloNet video call, asking, where do we go next and what do we do? And I had a question, Sam, and maybe this is something we sit on for just a second. I'm curious, in light of what we know, in light of what we see in episode 3, in light of what we would come to find out in Revenge of the Sith about the lack of trust in Palpatine, do we think that it's funny or weird that Palpatine is a part of this call with the Jedi?
Well, I think it's funny for at least the reason of he always seems to be available for calls, even though his job is running the entire galaxy.
That's what I'm getting at.
I don't know how he can always be a part of these like low-level transmissions that are just discussing war strategies. But he does always
specific war strategies too,
and they are very specific, especially if it revolves around Anakin. He is always has his fingers in there. And, I assume, I guess I should probably know this, these first episodes are pretty soon after Attack of the Clones. So we still got a while in the timeline, but he's always there, always present.
Right. I thought it was funny. It hit me similar thought of just going like, you not have enough to do that now you're jumping in and also again for these Jedi, it does drive home a point of how shrouded the dark side was,
Mhm.
and even how shrouded the Jedi Masters were. That you're standing in the same room as this guy, talking strategy, and you have no clue that you're standing next to the very Sith Lord that you're looking for. For me, I think we get so many glances even in these episodes of Palpatine manipulating the puppet strings across the board on both sides. And I did just think it was funny. My brain started going like, maybe it's just master delegation. Maybe he's got everything wrapped up, or maybe he's so focused on this, economy's in the crapper. We got galactic crisis. But hey, you know what's the most important thing on my to-do list today? That call with Palpatine and Yoda discussing general strategy of what we're going to do. And
is Plo Koon and Commander Wolf okay? That's
right.
what I want to know.
A missing Jedi seems like I should jump on this call. Hold my calls. I'm jumping in on this one. But I think within this call, we see some, to your point, Ahsoka, brand new character. What I think is interesting is we begin to see some character development even in the very beginning of this conversation that would eventually be, I think for me, you see a little bit of in the Clone Wars movie, but if you never watched it, this is the early seeds of the character that we see Ahsoka become all the way up through Rebels, all the way up through The Mandalorian, right? Where, they say, well, hey, we can't contact Master Plo. Should we go after him and go rescue him? The Jedi, as they start to become calculated, say, we can't risk any more ships going out there. It's up to the will of the Force, gives this very contrite answer. And Ahsoka gets miffed and goes, no, we need to go save him. We need to go send somebody to go after him, to go find him. Questions the council. And Anakin is furious at her, which I thought was a cool intro to their relationship even, from the beginning, because you see Anakin, who's all about defying orders and doing his own thing. Think back to Attack of the Clones. I don't care. I'll do what I want, kind of thing. And now he's reprimanding his apprentice for the very same thing.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fascinating look at him, especially if, again, in the timeline, Attack of the Clones is so recent that you'd be like, oh wow, you've changed a little bit, right?
Right.
And he reprimands for and if I may too, what's even more interesting, if I could backtrack just a second, because we've gone so far into the episode already. When they call into Plo Koon at first, and Anakin and Ahsoka are on the hologram, she says something to him, and I don't remember the exact words, but it's something in his native language, and you can tell that there's like a bond there, right? And they cover it later in the episode. But so she reacts and she speaks out, and she is passionate about going to get him based on like a relationship and attachment, right? Which mirrors why Anakin does anything that he does. It's all about the people he loves and cares about. So I do think it was interesting that he, and as we see, he reprimands her for that in front of the council.
Right. And gets pretty openly mad and says, hey, I don't care what you say, Ahsoka, kind of stay in your place. They want us to go scout out and see if we can find the ship. We're not going on a rescue mission. And so what I love about this episode is that it jumps back and forth from these different perspectives, kind of throughout. And so, Ahsoka's bent out of shape. She's upset. But then we quickly go back to this debris field where the Malevolence, the ship, the big separatist ship with this weapon, is floating by. And this is something I wanted to point out. We talked about it a second ago. Dooku tells Grievous, right, we don't want any witnesses to tell about our weapon that we have, which I won't go down that rabbit trail that we're talking about space and inter-flight communication and all this stuff, but yet we're relying on eyewitness accounts to determine. This is not a Clone Wars roast. This is a Clone Wars podcast. But he says, I don't want any remaining witnesses, nothing like that. I want us to go out in the debris field and go out and go find any survivors and essentially eliminate them. And what we see, Sam, is, in my opinion, masked with some comedy, but also, if you actually think about it, pretty stinking dark, right? They send a droids out into the debris field with a specialty, seems very convenient, but a specialty pod that attaches to escape pods busts the windshield out, and sends the clones into the open atmosphere of space, or lack of atmosphere of space.
That's right. Special ordered. They special custom built ships for this job.
Very, very good. Hey, we have those can openers, right, that we can yank out and pull out there and do that. Very convenient for eliminating witnesses.
Very convenient. It's so funny. I mean, is it funny? I don't know. It's kind of dark, but the droids on top that are driving them too, like have these little helmets, and he's like singing along as he goes. Like,
what a juxtaposition!
Know.
As we eliminate clones into the vacuum of space, we're singing. You know what's interesting, Sam? I watched this one back with the subtitles on, and classic Filoni. I didn't even realize this at the time, but you know, when the droids are singing like what you're talking about, it actually says droid sings Imperial March.
Oh, weird.
Which I don't know if it was in a different key. I didn't know if it was like kind of like what we saw in Solo, right? Where you hear the Imperial March, but it's in a major key as opposed to a minor key. But I went back a couple times and I listened to it. Sure enough, that droid is humming the Imperial March, which didn't know droids can hum, but that's pretty good. I want to bring us to something that happens in the scene though. Plo Koon, again, in this escape pod that's dead in the water with his clones, and he's sitting there and he says something that takes us back to the theme that we had in episode 1 of this series. The clones are saying, we're dead, nobody's coming to find us, you know, we're out there. Plo Koon are saying, no, listen, like somebody's coming to come find us, I guarantee it. And we see a theme throughout these episodes, in these early ones, again, as Lucas is trying to get us to see the value of human life in the clones. And the one clone looks at Plo Koon and says, listen, if it was up to me, I wouldn't send anybody to come find us. I would send people to go find that weapon. And Plo Koon says this line, it's very particular. He looks at him, he says, I value your life more than finding that weapon. Here's how I know we're going to be found, because the Jedi value their people more than just completing the task, which is a precursor to what we're going to see. But I don't know about you, Sam, that line hit me again of almost, hey, we're going to keep drilling this home and reinforcing. These are not just mindless entities like the droids. These are actually people that we need to love and need to know, and are individuals.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this whole first season, you know, people might say it's the weakest one, but I like that they don't leave that idea. And you know, in this context, you know, Filoni's a big Plo Koon guy for whatever reason, and just decided that this is going to be like the wise figurehead here, and I'm all about it. I'm here for it. He's got even more throughout this episode, where he's very committed to his clones and to the human aspect of it.
Right. We'll keep moving along here, but so Anakin and Ahsoka go out to go scout ahead to go see if they can find this ship. They take this ship from the Clone Wars movie. I don't know if you noticed that, but the Twilight is the ship that they use. Love that little callback and reference to bring that back in, just this random freighter ship. Take it out to go find him. And what's so interesting is they have a great discussion in the cockpit as they're going about, you know, I can't believe you defied the council. That's not right. That's not right. That's not right. They come out of hyperspace in the Abregado system, and Ahsoka looks at him and goes, what the heck? Like, you just got mad at me for defying the council, but now we're going here on a rescue mission to go find Plo Koon. And I love this line. I wrote this down because I think, and maybe we spend a second on here. It's so good. Ahsoka gets mad at him, and Anakin looks at him and he says, hey, listen, doing what the Jedi Council says is one thing. How we go about doing that is something different. And I feel like right here is just such a perfect glimpse into the splintering kind of mindset that's going on within Anakin Skywalker. This idea, right, of like, yeah, I know what the Jedi Council says. We'll go do it, but we may not take the most direct path to get there. We're going to kind of, that doesn't really apply to us, you know, what they're saying. And what I thought was so interesting about this is we hear people all the time, you know, Twitter. We just did a podcast the other night, and somebody was talking about the disappointment in episode 3 was that we didn't get enough of Anakin's fall, right? Like we didn't get enough of Anakin moving from this superstar Jedi to now he's slaughtering younglings in the temple, you know, for fun.
Read the novel.
Read the novel, man. Do you want to talk about that for a second and give us a plug for the novel?
Oh yeah, I'll give a plug for the novel. You should look up who writes it, because I always forget. I get my Star Wars authors mixed up. Big plug for the Revenge of the Sith novelization here, which I don't think is technically canon anymore. because it
Really?
makes, well, I think it contradicts a few things that would have happened in the Clone Wars show.
Huh.
And don't quote me on that, even though I'm putting it out there on the airwaves. But regardless, the if you just read it for the Anakin chapters, you would not be disappointed.
Right.
It is all about his inner monologue and his his grappling with his extreme power and ability to pretty much do anything, and his knowledge that he is the chosen one and he is probably the strongest force user in the galaxy, but just this immense fear that he has of losing everything and losing the people closest to him and even losing himself. And then how those two things kind of come to a head, and he makes this choice that there is nothing because everything ends, and he falls.
Right.
So go read it for yourself, though, because I'm not very eloquent for these sort of
Oh,
things.
what a great plug. Makes me want to go back and go read it again. That was written by Matthew Stover.
There you go, Matthew
Just
Stover.
for the record. And if you're listening to this podcast, Brent Dykman, and you say, I'm not reading books, I don't want to do it, there is an audiobook that is pretty fantastic for this as well, too. So go check that out. But we get people that get us, kind of get caught in this trap of saying we don't see the downfall of Anakin fast enough. And why I love Clone Wars is I feel like even in episode 2 of Clone Wars, we're getting little sprinkles of, well, what the Jedi Order is saying is kind of suggestion. I'm already married to my wife, but what they're saying, we're going to go rescue Plo Koon because this is what I feel like is the right thing to do. And we see this start impressing on Ahsoka. Anything to add on this, Sam? That stuck out to me as something kind of monumental in this episode.
I think you hit it right on the head there. Just that, just instead of being so brash and out loud about it, it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna do my own thing and deal with the consequences later. But I know that those will be few and manageable. And yeah, it just starts to kind of take on his own persona more.
Plus, I'm the chosen one, so
right.
Sue me. I'll do what I want. We'll figure out how that happens. So we move along in the episode. Back in the pod with Plo Koon and the clone soldiers, they are able to do what most people do in Star Wars and override something within the pod, connect a couple wires differently. And now they have charge again, and the pod comes back online, which is beautiful because it puts them in connection with another pod. Well, let's say it's beautiful. We actually see that pod get destroyed and the clones get sucked out into the vacuum of space. RIP those clones. But by coming back online, it signals Anakin, Ahsoka, and R2-D2 to come find them. However, it also signals one of these droid poppers, if that's the right word. I don't know what we're actually deeming those, can openers, whatever it may be, to come towards them. This droid popper comes, attaches to the pod, and begins to attempt to solder through the windshield to break it, which leads us to what I think is one of the coolest points within this episode, which, you know what, Sam? Hang on. I skimmed right past something. You brought it up earlier in the episode. You talked about the connection between Plo Koon and Ahsoka. You want to talk about that and why there's this emotional connection before we get to the cool action stuff?
Yeah, and I always get my scenes in this one mixed up in what order they go in because they flip back and forth.
Right.
At some point, she is telling Anakin, because he notices, probably because he does this all the time, that her reaction and desire to find Plo Koon is very rooted in some sort of attachment. And she shares with him that when she was young, that Plo Koon had found her. And I don't think she goes into more details. They might get into it later. But he was the one that had found her when she was very young. There was some sort of like slave trade deal and brought her to the Jedi Temple where she belonged. And I think it's interesting she used those words, where she belongs, just kind of that Jedi plug of like, these kids come here when they're 1-2 years old. It's like, well, this is where I belong. This is like my home. Right. So yeah, she just has this, almost like fatherly attachment to Plo Koon, who brought her there.
Right. Which, thank you for bringing this. I just didn't want to miss that as we walk through it. What's the reason behind her connecting her attention? So back to where we were. The ship is being attacked by droids, and I see something so cool here in this episode. It's almost a flashback, but what's his name? Plo Koon looks at the clones and he says, "Hey, put your helmets on. We're going to leave the pod and we're going to go fight the droids." And so the droids come, to attack this unarmed, dead in the water escape pod. And as they show up, all of a sudden, blue lightsaber gets ignited. Plo Koon is outside of the escape pod in open space.
Not yellow, sadly.
Not yellow, unfortunately.
Not yellow.
You know what? We're just going to continue to use blue because why not just have blue and green be the thing? We just talked on the podcast about why is there no, Black Series Rey yellow lightsaber? Why can't we get that lightsaber from the end of? That's not what we're here to talk about. But but why can't we get that? And the clones emerge out with their helmets on that they can breathe in, which I thought was such an interesting parallel. If you remember back to the Gendry Tartakovsky, which Clone Wars series, an episode or in season 2, I believe it is. I felt like this was such a harken back to it. I'm going to say his name wrong, so excuse me for saying it. But Saesee Tiin, that Jedi Master who gets killed eventually by Sidious. In that 2003 version of this, he leads a whole battalion of clone troopers out on top of a Star Destroyer. And there's a battle that ensues, kind of hand-to-hand fighting outside, but the clones are out in the vacuum of space, able to breathe.
In their suits, yeah.
In their suits, able to make it happen. I felt like it was a cool harken back to that almost of like, hey, these clones, they're actually pretty awesome. They can survive in the vacuum of space for a limited amount of time. And it starts this incredible fight that I just thought was really cool, which, by the way, all of those 2003 Clone Wars series will be available on April, what is it, 2nd? I think it's April 2nd.
Either 2nd or 9th.
Which
I think it's a single digit.
Friday.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this later, April 2nd. Praise the Lord. Go watch those. Maybe at some point we take a little detour, Sam, and we talk through those as well too, and do that. Anything on the space battle that you would add? Because I thought it was actually pretty cool.
No, yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, we can talk about we don't have to talk about the fact that I don't know why they don't just use the can opener to just break the glass. I don't know why they feel the need to squish it, but it gives time for
dramatic effect.
Dramatic effect. It's always about the dramatic effect of the bad guys. But I'm a big fan of like when things happen in space and it's pretty like realistic. Like they go out there. I mean, realistic. But it's so slow. Even the droids, it's like, shoot. And they kind of like, it's more about like positioning, finding yourself, and it's just a good battle. I enjoyed it.
Right. Really cool. And the use of the Force in space to call people back and to do that. Very, very cool scene. But they're able to save themselves. And as they are saving themselves, up pulls Anakin, Ahsoka, R2-D2, and they are able to grab Plo Koon and his clones. Yes, Sam.
Don't float by this part because this was my favorite part of the whole episode. And if you can't tell, I just love the Force and relationship aspect of things. They get called back first. Remember, Obi-Wan calls into Anakin and is like, hey, you've redirected yourself. You need to come back. Otherwise, like, we're going to be in trouble. Like, you need to get back to your ship. And even Anakin at this point is like, all right, look, we haven't found him. We got to go. Like, Ahsoka, I'm sorry, but this is just, we tried.
Right.
And Ahsoka sits there and it's almost like, and the first time I can think about this is it's probably like Empire Strikes Back, but it's that Force knowledge that somebody else is there. So like you think back to the early Star Wars movies when it's like Luke and Darth Vader and it like cuts between their faces and it's like, okay, we know each other's there. And they do that in this episode and they don't do it a lot later in the show.
Right.
But they show Plo Koon like sitting there on the escape pod and then it goes to Ahsoka and she kind of like thinks, and they do that a couple times. She's like, nope, I know he's here. Takes the controls and just goes for it.
Which I think you bring up such a great point. And I wonder this is why we do this conversation. We talk about this stuff because reality is somebody on our podcast a couple months ago brought this up that, everybody crapped on The Last Jedi for the, Kylo Ren Rey scenes, right? Where they're talking through the Force and this dyad kind of thing. Reality is we got that in The Empire Strikes Back with Vader and with Luke Skywalker. And what I think is so interesting is this emotional connection allows them to be able to sense each other, to speak in the Force across great distance. And so great point, Sam. I think that is a great harken back to something we've already got and something that we would see later. And quite frankly, something that I'm hoping that we see in more Star Wars as we keep going. So great point. They pick them up. Ahsoka takes them back. They find them. They rescue them. However, as they're leaving, their ship is picked up on the scanner by the Malevolence, the super ship that got us into this mess in the very beginning. And the ship turns around, comes back towards them, and fires an ion blast again at the Twilight as they're escaping, which I just thought was a cool scene in of itself. One of the coolest parts was, you got to believe they had fun with this. When you see the ion cannon firing, it's almost a shot for shot, with the exception of the color of the Death Star.
Yep.
Death Star laser, which I thought was very cool to show, hey, we've already worked out the mechanics of this, so that when Galen Erso builds out the Death Star someday, hey, we got to have some large laser tube to be able to shoot.
We know what those look like.
Right. So they're escaping from this giant blast. They're flying out into space. R2-D2 comes back online and is attempting to put in the coordinates. And I thought it was actually a pretty visually cool shot, watching Anakin pilot and try to outrun this energy blast.
This whole arc is a great, and I should have said this at the beginning, it feels so much like Star Wars. It feels a lot like a Star Wars movie. It's obviously got it's a Cartoon Network show. It's broken into 3 parts feeling, but it feels a lot like a Star Wars movie. And I watch it on Blu-ray when we're preparing for this. I got the collection on Blu-ray, and I don't have as many nuggets for this arc as I normally would, but when they were talking about the scene when he's flying through, George Lucas, I sometimes I forget this, that George Lucas was like there for a lot of these episodes, right? And like was kind of over Dave Filoni's shoulder.
He was driving it, if I'm not
yeah, he was. I mean, he is the driver, right? Yeah. He's the guy. And this scene where they're flying through, he said, really felt like the first time when everybody was kind of like on the edge of their seats, even like George and Dave, of like, wow, this is like good. We set this up well.
Right.
This feels like they might not escape.
Right. Which honestly, even watching it back, I could not remember. Do they escape or do they not escape? So great point. I was they're flying, and my immediate cynicism goes to like, turn right, turn left, like fly, go over it, whatever.
It's a big circle.
But it just fly outside of the perimeter of it. But it makes for great TV. And so at the last second, our heroes escape via hyperspace. Now with this knowledge of, not only have we seen the ship, but now we know the exact power of what it does. We've got some eyewitnesses, and we can take this back to the council to figure out our strategy moving next. And our episode ends with Anakin and Ahsoka getting ready to go meet with the council. And I love this. Anakin invites Ahsoka to come back and talk with the council, as this moment of, hey, I know that it's frustrating, but come on, I'm with you. We're going to do this together. You weren't wrong in your desire to want to go save Plo Koon.
Yeah.
Which, beautiful first episode. Thought in a 3-episode arc, gave us a ton of meat for an episode where honestly we're sitting around in an escape pod for most of it. Still got some great meat for where we're going, which then leads us right into the next episode. The first one was Rising Malevolence. Second one is Shadow of Malevolence. And I love how this one starts because it starts in the hangar of one of the Venator class Star Destroyers that they have. And it's Anakin briefing a battalion of clones. Essentially, we hear from the voiceover, I'll paraphrase it, but we hear from the voiceover that, the ship, the Malevolence, has been attacking Republic ships. And we see some great cutscenes, again, dark cutscenes of just ships getting blasted out of the water. Or go for it, please.
Yeah, no, I think this is the one that opens. It's like I know they eventually get to the medical base, but this one's like a medical frigate, and it's just a single ship that's tiny in comparison to this one. And it really just shows how much of, and we'll talk about this throughout the whole series, is like General Grievous, for as terrifying as he is and like he's meant to be, ultimately he's a coward.
Right.
I mean, he is just so bent on having a weapon that he doesn't actually need to fight. He can just destroy and not actually have to do any of the work.
He'll take you out of the battle, and just it almost feels like cheating, right? Like kind of, and that's something we'll reference as we go. But it leads the council to say, hey, Anakin, you're one of our best pilots. We want you to take a squadron of Y bombers, which I thought was a very cool, kind of insert. And we want you to go, essentially track down the Separatist ship, destroy the ion cannon, really destroy the ship, and try to get us to a place where this isn't a threat anymore. And so it starts in this hangar. Him, Plo Koon, Ahsoka, they're briefing this Y squadron or Y bomber squadron of here's what we're going to do, where we're going to go. We get some great new clones added into this, some great personalities. I did think one thing was interesting. As Anakin was briefing them, he says this. He says, "We are using the Y bombers because they are fast and can evade the weapon." And I laughed out loud when I saw that back this time. I missed it the first time. I laughed when I saw it back this last time because I wanted to be like, dude, have you ever played Rogue Squadron? That ship is so slow and non-maneuverable, and we're going to take the Y bombers. Maybe it's a different version of the ship. All I can tell you is if you're flying a Republic or a Alliance version of the Y-wing, that thing is slow, man. You need a fast ship.
It's slow, yeah. Maybe the ones in the games and the older movies they're old. They've been in service for 20 years, 20, 30 years.
Wow,
so.
That's a great point. And maybe that's a Filoni nugget.
Space physics. Who knows?
Who knows? That's not why we're here. We're not here to talk physics. You have the licensing to teach physics. I do not. But crazy. So he introduces this squad, and one of my favorite parts is he calls them the Shadow Squadron, which I just think is a bad name. I think that it's bad in the best possible way. I think it's very cool name, and it cuts immediately to exactly what you were talking about. The Separatists just blasting every Republic ship that they come in, and really blasting this medical frigate. And we could spend probably a whole episode just talking about the cowardice of General Grievous, exactly what you're talking about, and blasting this medical frigate. It sets up this idea where, Ahsoka actually says a line during the briefing and says, surely like Grievous isn't that bad that he would take out clones that couldn't fight back, which I thought was an interesting, kind of comparison where you look at it. But something really small. Again, this is very small as I come through. I know it's not canon anymore, the 2003 Clone Wars series. I need an explanation then if that's not canon, because in canon, Grievous is just decimating people all over the place. There's one episode of that in the 2003 version of it. He just like slaughters 5 or 6 Jedi, without even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
As he steals Chancellor Palpatine, stop me if you haven't seen this, and I'm going to spoiler. You know what? I'm not going to spoil this. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about it later because it's so good. Again,
we'll do a 2003 show.
We'll do a 2003 show. I can't spoil this because reality is, if you haven't watched it, I can't necessarily fault you. It's been available on the internet for some time now, but it's coming back to Disney Plus, and so I want people to be able to see it. I won't do that. Put a pin in it, Sam. Putting a pin in it. Pin it right here. But I do think something that's interesting is we get another comparison again in episode 3 that we've gotten in episode 2 and in episode 1 about how the Jedi view the clones and how the Separatists view the droids, right? You see this comparison. Grievous is talking to one of the droids on the bridge. The droid says something to him that's not sassy, but isn't what he wants to hear. Grievous, without even thinking, just de-heads the droid, right? And Dooku, who's on a call at that point, who's on a hologram at that point, says, hey, General Grievous, those droids are expensive, and Grievous actually makes some line saying, essentially, hey, like, I don't have the weakness that the Jedi have. Mm-hmm. They value the life of their clones.
Yeah.
And they don't want to just dispose of them as well. And it's a weakness that we're going to continue to explore, which leads them to unveiling the arc of this entire episode, which is we're going to take this super weapon, go attack a
medical base.
That's it. Excuse me. A medical base.
Secret medical base. That's what they say.
Apparently it's not so secret, but we're going to attack a secret medical base with, what was it? 100,000 clones or something on it.
Yeah, 60 or 100 or
something.
60 100,000
than more right. But they go to attack them, and so it interjects this plot of we are racing against time to go fight this ship that is going to attack this base full of helpless clones. Talk to me some about this, because I think, again, I know we've talked about it in little portions already, but I just think it's interesting that we're getting this very distinct difference between the droids and the clones. Even though the droids have this, I was reading back through a visual dictionary the other day, and after the Battle of Naboo, the Trade Federation changed their how they made their droids, and so they weren't based out of one control ship anymore. They all had individual personalities and kind of ran independently, but they still draw a comparison to say, hey, we are not that. Like, we're very different. Did that stick out to you at all?
Oh yeah, yeah. And even, I mean, you already touched on the Dooku Grievous interaction there, and the fact of, like, I think even Grievous says, oh no, because Dooku says, the Jedi aren't this mean to their clones, and then that's when they start to have the back and forth. Yeah, it turns out having one central control system, bad idea. Bad idea if you're in a war.
Bad idea. Not even a great idea in theory. Just a bad, bad idea.
Was a bad one in theory, but no, I think that's a great point. Is they continue to just contrast these two, and it's funny because the droids do have personalities. I think if they had zero personality, that contrast wouldn't be as obvious. But they do, even if they're just for comedic purposes.
Right. Which I think you hit on something there. Genius idea to use these droids as a comedic purpose, right? And to really, I mean, the clones do some funny things too, but to use the clones as kind of the whole arc is, hey, these guys matter and they have individual personalities, and we're going to put on a D. Baker Bradley field day and let him just go to town voicing all these different things. So again, we talked about Palpatine in the last episode, and we talked about, or in the last episode 102, about how Palpatine is in the weeds of this whole plan organization, and Dooku actually, through Palpatine, informs Grievous, hey, there's a strike force that's coming. You better get to this base and go knock this thing out, because the strike force is led by Anakin Skywalker. So don't take this lightly, right? Like, go after it. And this is something that, again, whether for better or worse, is something that Star Wars, can occasionally do. But to get to the medical base, the separatist ship Malevolence has to fly around a cluster nebula and isn't going to go straight through it. Instead, they start going around. So it takes them the longer way through, whereas Anakin tells Shadow Squadron, we're going to go right through, and we're going to follow a path called the Balmorra Run, which, very cool part of this episode. Anakin says, they say, how'd you find out about this run? Anakin, once they're inside the actual cluster, goes, hey, I found out about this listening to smugglers talk about it on Tatooine. I just thought it was very cool.
Awesome
reference, man. Not only are you a good pilot, but you know your stuff, man. Like, you're very good at what you do. And then once they're inside this nebula, they're trying to cut them off and get there before they do. Great storytelling, excellent way of, setting some more dramatic tone for this thing. Plo Koon goes, wait a minute, what's the name of this? And he says, the Balmorra Run. And Plo Koon immediately goes, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here. And he's like, take it easy. Why? And we are introduced to a creature that nests within the nebula called the giant Nebrae mantis, which I thought was very cool. Essentially, hey, we're going to take all the sea creatures of the world, turn them into space monsters that fly around in the vacuum of space and live and breed within this nebula. And it leads to, again, you could call it unnecessary to the plot of the show, but I think it's very cool to see, again, more in-depth glimpses of the galaxy. One of my favorite parts of Solo was actually them flying through the Maw and getting to, see this thing that we've heard about, the Kessel Run.
Mm-hmm.
Kessel Run is this super dangerous, kind of thing. So I don't know. Anything to add on that?
I have people with that I talk to, friends, whatever, that like Star Wars, or consider themselves somewhere on the fan spectrum, and they always complain about whenever they introduce, especially when it comes to Clone Wars and Rebels, like, oh, monster here, monster there, and like my response every time is like, this is space,
right?
Like, you're complaining about big monsters in a world where they can control light beams and move things with the Force and travel through light speed. And it's always funny to me, because it's like, of all the things that you could pick out, the fact that there is an animal that adapted to its environment of living in a nebula could possibly exist.
But sure enough,
in this universe,
people still find flaw in that. Think about this. One of the greatest movies in this whole saga, Empire Strikes Back. Did anybody in 1980 have a problem with the space slug that came out into the vacuum of space and
lives in an asteroid?
Why not?
Why not?
Because it's in a galaxy far, far away.
That's right.
So anyway, they escape the nebula, they get out of that, and as they are flying towards the Malevolence, And Sam, help me out on here because my details are a little foggy. Again, this episode, I feel like there's so much packed into this as they go, but it leads to kind of a firefight with the Malevolence, and I can't remember if it happens before, if it happens after, but the Malevolence blasts another ion blast towards them. They're within visual sight of the medical base, blasts a ion cannon shot towards Shadow Squadron, and they do what we talked about in the first episode. They attempt to go over the top of them.
Yep. This one, you're right. They pack so much into this. When I went back and watched this, I thought that I didn't even think they got to the bombing part until the third episode. Right. So it's amazing how much they pack in. If the going through the nebula was strike one of Anakin being like, okay, maybe this plan, it's not so great, but he's going to push through. This was strike two because they show up and they were not expecting fighters to be ready to go.
Right.
So they've got these bombers. All of a sudden, there's all these droids coming at them, and their plan is to they want to hit the bridge, right? Like they want to destroy the weapon, but it's like, hey, we can hit the bridge, take out the weapon, and take out Grievous in one shot, right? So why would we not do that? So they're heading towards it, and you're right. They send the ion cannon, and they end up having to pull up, finally. Yeah. I guess if you've got some prep, maybe you can do it a little bit better. But
you see it coming.
Yeah. But they do lose 2, 3, 4 ships, including named clone whose name escapes me. It's not Waxer and Boyle. Matchstick. There you go.
Yeah, I
think so.
I had it in the show notes here somewhere. But again, great idea of, hey, we're going to introduce these cool. It felt very Top Gun-ish to me. We're going to give them these names. You get Oddball later. But very cool. And what I love is as they get over the top of this thing, again, pandemonium, all these droid fighters flying all over the place, laser blasts going everywhere. And Anakin is making the attack run for the bridge. And Ahsoka says something to him that I thought was very cool. He said, we can make it. And she said, you might be able to, but nobody else can.
Yep.
And I thought it was such a cool, again, Anakin saying like, I'm the best. I got to do what we got to do to get this done. We can't fail. And Ahsoka going like, hey, we fail if this whole squadron goes down, right? Like we can't accomplish our purpose. And so per Ahsoka's suggestion, in the moment, Anakin changes course and says, we're not going after the bridge anymore. We're going to go after the weapon itself. Land some perfectly targeted shots on the non-shielded, might I point out, weapon.
Right as it's about to go off.
Right as it's about to go off. And that's what does it, right? And so it's a surge of energy. They make it so it can't fire anymore. And the ship is catastrophically damaged. Knocks out not just the weapon, knocks out the hyperdrive. And I know I'm moving faster than Sam, but it turns them to a place where they are now fleeing for their lives back to separatist space, and they are being pursued by Obi-Wan Kenobi and a fleet of Venator class ships.
Yeah, the tides turn right here at the end of the second episode, right? They go from very much in control to all of a sudden now Grievous is back where he is, and that's on the run, being a coward.
Naturally, just turning and running. And I thought what was very cool was at the very end, little throwaway line, but just something worth noting. They land back in the hangar. Ahsoka looks at Anakin and she says something, Anakin says, hey, like, I'm glad that plan worked, kind of takes credit for the plan that it worked that way. And Ahsoka says, it was my idea to change the plan. Like, don't get it twisted. It was my idea to change the plan. And Plo Koon looks at her and he says, that's true from a certain point of view. Which again, I know that's going to piss some people off, but man, is that just the company line of the Jedi, right? Like from a certain point of view, that's true. From a certain point of view. Little did we know later we would get books called A Certain Point of View that I'm not a huge fan of, but we would get, books with that. It would be Obi-Wan Kenobi's catchphrase. People would use that to describe every miracle that happens in the Force ever. I just thought it was a cool little throwaway line, but just to go, Dave Filoni, you genius.
Yeah, just a little bit of tension there too. I'm glad you brought that up with the kind of exchange they have there as they're going through, because it's like I said, if the attack was strike number 2, he was gonna make it strike number 3 and lose the whole thing, because he's not perfect. I mean, he's still 19, 20 and brash, And I like that it just kind of gives that window into like that, and it comes back to haunt her a lot in these early seasons, but just that boldness that she has. And it's not a timid master apprentice relationship. It's
Right.
very much like hey, whoever's in the wrong here is gonna know about it.
We are all about candid feedback within this master
Mhm.
apprentice relationship,
Yeah.
which I love. That episode ends and it moves us into the final episode of this 4-part
But
arc. Yes, Sam, sorry.
I was gonna say one more thing on it because
Please
I
bring it.
have to say is I visually again this episode has great callbacks to the original trilogy. Pretty much all of the space battle, like even when they're doing the run, just the way the ships come in from the back and over, they could go a lot of ways. They had the prequels already that they could have drawn from. It's animated, so they do their own thing, but this one does a really good job of drawing from like the original trilogy shots coming into the ship. So just thought that was cool.
No,
Wanted to
it's
make
so
sure that.
true. And what a thing to consider, right? Of hey, we're gonna go make this animated series. How do we make this feel like the original, but still do our own thing? Which I feel like should be the ongoing question for anything Star Wars that gets created from here on out. How do we do our own thing, but how do we pay tribute to the things that have come before us? Which great point, Sam. And we move into our final episode. And what we're gonna do for this final episode is hit some bigger points within this one. The beauty of doing a live show is that you never know what's going to happen while you're doing a live show. And I got the baby cam set up, and I could see my son starting to stir, which he's a future Star Wars fan. Not a big enough Star Wars fan to sit through a whole podcast yet. So we'll talk some big points, some big issues in this. I promise we're going to do it justice. We're not going to skim through this too much. But this episode starts out, again, where we left off. The Malevolence is on the run. It's being it's on fire in space, exploding. It's leaking smoke, and it's being pursued by Obi-Wan Kenobi and a couple of ships. And it looks like, from Obi-Wan Kenobi's perspective, we have finally are about to capture General Grievous. Like, it's time. We got him. One of the lines that I wrote down that I thought was interesting, and again, you just talk about maybe this is the Jedi way, maybe it's not. They're within striking distance, and Obi-Wan Kenobi says, target the bridge, maximum firepower, which, again, for keepers of the peace, we're not generals, we're keepers of the peace. It's a pretty generally thing to do, right? To go, hey, target that bridge, maximum firepower, wipe out everybody up on that thing because we're right, they're wrong. Just thought it was an interesting, kind of throwaway line. But it's in this moment that Dooku holograms into Grievous. And Grievous says, we can't jump into hyperspace. We're trying to get our hyperspace generator back online. It's not working, but we are, trying to figure out what we're going to do and where we're going to go. And Dooku says, listen, I've got some help that's coming your way that may stop them from firing on you until you can
Fix the
get out of
hyperdrive.
there.
Yeah.
Which, Sam, talk to us about the bait. What was the bait?
On cue, just to get another character in there, none other than Padme shows up because she got secret information from Chancellor Palpatine to meet the banking clan out in the middle of space, which funny that they would meet at a secret medical base. There's a lot of, and we should just talk about this now. I don't know how this one isn't the most obvious part of Palpatine being a bad guy, because he would give one senator secret information that led her right into a firefight.
Like, what's our debrief process on this? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did this not at the end of this come back and go like, hey, guy, thank you for throwing me right into the middle of a space battle. Next time, either check your sources or, yo, did you mean to do that? Like, did you mean to send me out?
Right.
That's a great point, Sam.
Yeah. So, and so there she is. She gets captured.
Sure enough, gets captured, and she's in tow with C-3PO, which is the first time we see C-3PO in this
series,
in this entire series. Yeah, which is so cool because when the ship comes out of hyperspace with Padme on it, immediately the clone ships pick it up, and Anakin's on the bridge, and he has this moment where he's talking with Padme, and you can feel the tension. For an animated series, you can feel the tension. That's my wife. She's out there. She says, don't stop firing. Take this thing out. Like, this is your moment to do it. And Anakin, again, little precursor to where we're going to see him eventually go, says, stop firing. We can't blow that ship up if she is in it. Which I thought was very, again, if I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, this is a red flag for me. And I'm going, hey, we need to start asking some more questions. And again, what we'd find out later is maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi knew more about this than we actually thought. And so he could be going, hey, I get it, makes sense. And so,
Well, and if you're Ahsoka, how much are you just like, wait, what?
yeah, right.
Didn't we just go through this?
We just went through the same stinking thing. And what I love about this is that now we see this turn from a rescue mission to a covert stealth. We're going to go take out the ship back into a rescue mission because now we have to rescue Padme before this ship escapes into hyperspace and we never see it ever again. And so moving quickly, Anakin, Obi-Wan, take the freighter again, take the Twilight, and Ahsoka, or no, Ahsoka stays on the ship, excuse me. They take the Twilight and very quietly and casually fly over to the Malevolence where they attach to an airlock and they go in to go save Padme, who in the meantime has rigged her ship to explode. I don't know about you. What a feature. What a feature to be able to just go, hey, I'm going to set this ship to explode. Thank goodness that feature does not exist in my Jeep, or we would have a big time problem.
Cars everywhere.
Exploding cars. I'd use it as a diversion, but Padme and 3PO escape within the bowels of this giant ship, which leads us to this point where we now have two separate groups running throughout the ship. We have Anakin and Obi-Wan running to find Padme. We have Padme and C-3PO on the run. And they get kind of split up into these different factions, different units.
Yeah.
Anything you would add on this, Sam?
No, they get split up and they start, she's obviously running from Grievous. They're trying to find her and they end up in this huge freighter-like compartment. But I can't skip the part when they get on the elevator and they come up, right? And Obi-Wan and Anakin are there. And they just the throwaway line, you know where I'm going with this?
I think so. Bring it.
And all of a sudden, Obi-Wan, they just opens up like it was casual elevator conversation. And Obi-Wan goes, spinning is not flying, Anakin.
Yes.
And Anakin just goes, yeah. What does he say?
But it is a good trick.
Wolf. Oh, just such a great. I love that so much. That just.
But again, the beauty of guys that wrote this, to be able to go like, man, what a fun. You got to imagine they had so much fun writing 100%. This and taking this throwaway line that Jake Lloyd said back in 1999, 2000, and throw that in 2008. I'm so glad you referenced that. I couldn't remember where or how that was the thing, but man, what a great throwaway line. And I love that within this ship, what you see is it's such a massive ship. There's actually like a rail car system within this ship that's going from place to place and dropping off cargo. And again, we've talked about the stunning beauty of these episodes. For me, this is one of my favorite parts of this whole arc, just because I think this interconnected system of trams and trains within this giant ship, to me, creates amazing moments, but not only creates amazing moments, but it's visually stunning.
Mm-hmm.
This cavernous ship that almost functions like a cruise ship, right? Like if you've ever been on a cruise ship before, in the middle of the cruise ship, there's all this stuff on the walls, but there's this big open atrium, with stuff kind of throughout. And it was very cool. And it's in this moment that Anakin runs into Padme and they get split up from Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan, who goes to find C-3PO, who has done the C-3PO thing and gotten lost himself. And Anakin is reunited with Padme. And within this monstrous ship, as the train track turns and goes around the corner, Padme and Anakin embrace and they kiss, which this is the first time post Attack of the Clones, in between Revenge of the Sith, we see any sort of interaction with Padme and Anakin. And for me, it was beautiful rewatching that back. I thought they did such a great job of creating tension within those two.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And then as they move forward, because it's so quick and brief and great, and then I think it's Obi-Wan messages in, 3PO's lost, I'll go get him, we gotta move. And Anakin hates that sort of stuff. Like he's like, right. I'm here with my people, I'm checked out. But right. Padme then is like, oh yeah, we gotta go, we gotta do this, and then it just brings it right back to the types of tensions they have.
Absolutely. And what I think is so interesting is while Obi-Wan goes to find C-3PO, what actually he's going to do as well too is he's actually headed to the hyperdrive room to try to deactivate the hyperdrive. They catch word once they get inside the ship that they're repairing the hyperdrive. It's almost ready to go. And they're saying, we can't let these guys escape. Like, if they escape, this is done. We're never going to see him ever again. And Obi-Wan goes to do that. But like Obi-Wan, I was reminded of episode 3 where Anakin goes, I sense a trap. And he goes, what do we do? He goes, spring the trap. Obi-Wan walks right into the hyperdrive room where he is confronted by Grievous, who is waiting for him in the hyperdrive room, which I love. Anytime in this series we see more interactions between Grievous, Anakin, and Obi-Wan. The same with Count Dooku as well, too, because, again, if you're just looking at the installments of the films, episode 2, episode 3, I feel like you get maybe 15 minutes max, right, of all of them fighting, connected. And so any moments like that, I just think is fantastic. Anything about the hyperdrive scene that you would add?
No, just more that, Obi-Wan continues to toy with Grievous, kind of sets up that kind of, I think antagonistic is the right word, of just how, like, Grievous kind of starts to build up this, like, Kenobi's the prize.
Right.
And, Kenobi's like, yeah, I want to capture Grievous, but also I'm going to toy with him.
Absolutely. And what I think is so cool too is they build on a tension here that you see more in the Clone Wars than you ever see in that you see necessarily in Revenge of the Sith, but is this relationship between Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Padme, right? We talk all about, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, but so like when Obi-Wan is fighting Grievous, right? All of a sudden Anakin and Padme go, okay, well now we have to go set the ship to destroy or do something to sabotage the ship. So they get to the bridge, they redivert from just getting back to the Twilight, get to the bridge, take out the droids on the bridge, and set the ship on a collision course with the nearest moon that just very conveniently happens to be located. We're going to say convenient a lot, but happens to be located next to them where they're going. And they set the ship on a collision course with this moon, all while simultaneously getting back to the ship. Grievous and Obi-Wan have this beautiful duel on one of those trains that I'm talking about, which, again, maybe I'm just a big train guy, and I didn't know I'm a big train guy until now as we're like talking it out loud, but a very cool scene. And sure enough, unless I'm missing anything, our heroes get to the Twilight, escape the ship, but simultaneously Grievous also escapes, and we continue to see more of the same. But this ship, this super weapon, instead of destroying a clone facility base full of injured clones, ends up impacting or detonating on impact when it flies into the moon's surface that Anakin and Padme set it on. Anything I missed, Sam, at the end of it?
Just when they're leaving, Grievous does pursue them. They have a little fight, and it kind of shows like, Padme can handle herself. I think even Obi-Wan, he might even say that same thing. It's like, oh, she can really handle herself, and they kind of have like the team dynamic on their way out. But once he realizes all is lost, he flies away into hyperspace. And then I love that they end on a shot like from the cockpit, a very, very old school Star Wars ending. Like, hey, here's the team. Look at us.
Look what we did.
See ya. Yep.
We did this.
They don't really smile because it's still like the older animation, but it's great.
I felt like it was a very fitting end of the arc. They could have gone back to the ship and done some more dialogue, but I love that it just ended and kind of went like, okay.
It felt like a movie ending. Yeah.
It felt like a movie. It felt like the end of A New Hope, where they do that wide shot of everybody. It felt like the end of Return of the Jedi when they do the wide shot of everybody. All sitting around.
And there's no dialogue there in either of those.
No doubt. Man, you think they just said, hey, let's run the same play? We could do a whole podcast on that too. You think they just ran the same play at the end of A New Hope as they did at Return of the Jedi? Hey, we don't know how to wrap this up. Play some music.
People love music.
Show them having a good time. Well, Sam.
Give him a little yub chub.
Jeez, oh, Pete, man. I'm curious for you. Final thoughts, closing sentiments on this arc.
I mean, like I said, you gotta go, I gotta go, and I could muse aplenty, but I just love this arc because it feels like a Star Wars movie, like a mini movie. Right. I think it does a great job introducing these, big time relationships that are the backbone of the show, and these themes into the backbone of the show. And excited to watch some more, talk about some more.
I completely agree. I know we got to go too. I will say this: the final thought for me is to talk about how last week we talked, or last time we talked about how episode 1 kicks it off with, in my opinion, is exactly what it needed to set the series up. I feel like it would have been easy to maybe take a step backwards after that first one, but I felt like they did such a great job in these 3 episodes in an arc of going, hey, we're going to take these and we are going to push the narrative forward and the character development of these characters that you love right away. Kind of like, hey, we all know that you're here for some character development. Let's not get it twisted. Here's exactly how we're going to help push that along while add some new things. So overall, fantastic arc. We loved it. Again, if you've not watched it yet, please go watch episode 102, 103, and 104 of the first season. Absolutely fantastic arc. And hey, if you're still listening and you've watched with us up to this point, thanks for sticking around and listening. We're super grateful. We've had some great feedback on Twitter. My promise is that the next time that we come back, I'll be more prepared and I'll be able to actually give some shout outs. But the ones that jump to my mind, at Rural Farm Boy, thank you for cheering us on Twitter. We're pumped. Everybody else that has shouted out on Twitter about the Clone Wars Chronicles in specific, just super grateful for you guys, and love getting to talk some Clone Wars. If you guys have more arcs that you go, hey, we got to talk about this and let's plumb these out a little bit more, please hit us up on Twitter at rulethegalaxysw. Shoot us an email at rulethegalaxysw@gmail.com, or check us out on YouTube. You can check it out. Just search Rule the Galaxy SW. I don't want to close this episode out with saying big thank you to Joe Molinaro and the entire Rule the Galaxy team for letting us get a chance to do this. Thank you for trusting us with this and for letting us be a part of your empire. And so that is all for this time, friends. Until the next time that we get a chance to talk, may the Force be with you.